My name's Audrey. I'm a senior student at Caesar, and yeah, excited to be graduating slash finishing with my project. It's an early graduation because of COVID, but
Mm,
yeah, it definitely wasn't the best senior experience I was looking forward to. But everyone's making sacrifices at this point, so.
yeah. Are you working or are you at school remotely or are you in some kind of hybrid model?
I'm in sort of like a hybrid model at this point, mostly online, but I do come in to do some limited amount of work at the office. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. But hopefully vaccines will be rolling in someday and
Yeah. I have a question for you about Caesar. Are you majoring in something in a different department and then sort of pulling it together under Caesar, or how is the yeah, how are you doing your major?
Oh, I am majoring in Caesar. So
Ah,
yeah, yeah. So we have this year I think we have about like 17, 15, 17 people who are like solely majoring in Caesar and are doing
mm.
senior thesis project. So that's worked out for
Oh,
the
cool.
yeah,
Great.
yeah, yeah.
My understanding, this was like 25 years ago, so, or what, 24, 23 years ago, was that it was you couldn't major in the like through the center specifically, but that you had to draw from other departments and then pull together your sort of curriculum.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. That used to be sort of the norm, but I think eventually like we came up with like more courseworks, so we didn't need to outsource to other departments to like fulfill the requirements. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, we're really flexible with concentrators. So we've got
Mm-hmm.
like a bunch more concentrators who are sort of, taking classes in Caesar, but also have like a major concentration in like the English department or like the history department or yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Got it. Cool.
Yeah.
That's a good development.
Absolutely.
Great. Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So I got to know you because I interviewed Professor Marcel Agreros, who
Hmm.
was like who is still like teaching in Colombia under
Yeah.
the astronomy department, and I got hold of him right there.
Good for
Yeah.
you.
Yes. 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 And at the end, I reached out to him if he had any contact or like any information or leads to other protesters and like, major historical players during the period. And that was when your name dropped. So I was like, yeah, yeah.
Cool.
I'm just curious, like, what are you doing now? Are you I don't know, I tried guessing through your email address, but also
Yeah, I keep my personal email and my work email separate. So, but I work on climate policy, energy policy
Mm,
with global trade unions.
mhm.
So we're sort of like a mixture of kind of think tanky, and also we work with unions on the ground, um, developing progressive sort of alternative to the mainstream narrative of um, how to achieve energy transition to
Mhm.
avoid further climate catastrophe. So
Mhm. Oh, definitely, definitely. That sounds like a huge deal, especially now, I guess. Yeah. That that's been yeah, so I guess, were you like majoring in like environmental or like sustainable development, like something in your college years, or how did that turn out?
yeah, I mean, back in the day, you know, there wasn't even, I don't even remember what it's called now, but I know there's something at Columbia that's very focused on environment and sustainability, but
Mhm.
that didn't exist. There was like hardly anything around environmental specific courses that I can recall.
Right.
But I studied biology
Mhm.
and then education at Barnard. I was a student at Columbia, but Columbia didn't have its own education program, so I had to take classes at Barnard and go through their certification program. So I ended up teaching science for several years, but I was also doing sort of community organizing in the Asian American community for several years. And then I shifted to environmental justice organizing and working around environmental justice issues. And then sort of through that developed, I'd say my sort of class politics got more developed over time. And then I worked with a worker center in Manhattan's Chinatown. Did a lot of work around anti-displacement because the Chinatown Lower East Side area is getting massively, I mean, for decades, it's been massively under pressure to be developed ultimately, but then that creates, a huge movement of displacement of the people that live there, and then gentrification sort of evolves. So I worked with a group called Chinese Staff and Workers Association, which is still there, and they work closely with another worker center called NMAS, National Mobilization Against Sweatshops. So they're kind of a stronghold in that area. And sort of simultaneously, I mean, everything, there was a pretty clear understanding that everything at the worker center was also, you're dealing with people's environmental conditions in the context of work, and, whether you're, a home healthcare worker or a factory worker or restaurant worker, or whether you're in a middle-class management job, the pressures are, the pressures of capitalism are the same, really, compressing our time and, freedom to be active in other ways. So all that to say that I was doing that, and also had started to work with this project called Trade Unions for Energy Democracy. And so I think I was working part-time for Trade Unions for Energy Democracy and part-time at Chinese Staff. And so I felt like at some point, like, to really be able to, I guess, focus my attention more deeply on the climate stuff, and really like focus on energy policy, I needed to kind of give it my full attention. So I kind of shifted more to just working on Trade Unions for Energy Democracy work.
Absolutely. No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, because, community organizing and fighting for a cause, like, they're all interrelated, but sometimes you really need to give it your all. It takes like, it's one of the things that hardly stays in one small section of your life, right? It just,
Yeah,
it
that's right.
so much more. Absolutely.
No. Sort of becomes part of your lifestyle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yes. A whole, it's a whole pattern of life. It's a way of living instead of, just like a job or like a part-time thing. So
yeah. And that's true for the Trade Unions for Energy Democracy work also. It's and I think, both because I have an interest in the environment, but also because of the short timeline we have around the climate crisis. I felt like I wanted to dedicate my time and attention to that effort. So and that's really rooted in a class analysis in terms of what our perspective is and what we fight for, and how we think about the issue.
Yeah, I think it's great. And it's like, I've now talked to like two people, like, face to face, and like some more people, like researching on some more people, but it's so interesting and like fascinating how these student protesters, who are literally undergraduate students, graduate or PhD students, who are organizing like an on-campus social activist movement at that time, like, went on to do something that is bigger in scale, but on the similar path. So yeah, it's really, you know, affirming to me, because that is also what I want to do in the future. But
Mm,
yeah, it's great to see how it's influenced every part of like an individual life instead of abstract movement. Yeah.
yeah.
So I just realized, I cannot believe I did not realize it until now, but this is the 25th anniversary of the 1996 like April strike, like
Yeah.
hunger strike. Yeah, and it's mad because I kept, you know, thinking about it, thinking about like the year 1996, but I never did the math. But yeah, but you know, but when I was like presenting to a group of friends, my friend was like, "Oh, it's like exactly 25 years." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Wow." It really I did not know. Was really slow on that math department. So given that, I know it was 25 years ago, but I would just jog your memory back to the
Sure.
times. Mhm. So, were you a 1996 graduate? Like, what was your affiliation with Columbia University at the time of the 1996 strikes?
Sure. So yeah, that was the year I was supposed to graduate, 1996, but I ended up taking a year off. So I ended up graduating in 1997,
Mm-hmm.
and I was at Columbia College. And when I started, or yeah, so there was a small group of students who were trying to get Asian American studies on the map for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the women, she was also a science major, I think. We worked in the same bio lab together for our like work study program or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
she mentioned something to me, something that she was like, you might be interested in this or something. I can't remember exactly, but it was around the Asian American studies effort. It was a meeting or something. And so I think that was the beginning of it. It must have been 1993 before I took my year off, because as I was leaving that year, I think things were starting to get a little bit more active. I started to get involved, but nothing had really come to fruition yet in terms of like a bigger, broader struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came back a year later. And I don't remember clearly the chronology of this, but I do remember seeing there was something plastered on the wall of Butler Library. It
Mm-hmm.
was like flyers, and it was something a lot more sort of like, um, I don't know if militant is quite the right word. I don't know if we're quite there yet, but it was definitely more agitating
Yeah, yeah.
about the need. And I actually might have some of these flyers still. But anyways, it was some like clearly more agitated message to the administration, and they had created some kind of like, like flyer image, posted them like all along the wall. And so I knew that more was happening, and so I kind of jumped right back in, I think, um, and from there things just took off. I think we reached out to the Latino Students Organization, um, and that's where I first met Marcel,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, and then and then I think we reached out to the Black Student Organization,
Right.
and then it kind of built from there. And we were really pushing for like kind of hard hitting measures. We were kind of like,
Mhm.
we're not dealing with this anymore. This is crap, and so we need something to change soon. And so we wanted to build a united front. And we did, and it was a pretty amazing and tight group. um
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that was sort of the genesis of it.
Absolutely.
And that was probably, let's see, so if that was 1994, wait, maybe I have my timeline wrong. sorry, that was 95. That must have been
Mhm.
95. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Um, and so we started to do teach-ins, I think. That was some of the bigger first steps. And
Mhm.
I remember one of the teach-ins it was one of the first ones we held at Butler, but we
Mhm.
did it in the hallway, like, or I don't actually, I haven't been there in so long. I don't know if the
No, no.
infrastructure is the same, but
Mhm.
there used to be a hallway once you entered on the right side. And because it was the only sort of like, it wasn't in the library, so we could make noise, but it was sort of like a big enough space.
Yeah.
And so we ended up doing that. And I think I ended up being the moderator or something, or the facilitator, the MC or something. And I couldn't believe how many people were crammed in that little hallway. It was like so many, I mean, it was like people were spilling out. And so it was really exciting to see that much interest in wanting to make some difference on campus. So from there, it just kept building. I think we did maybe some more teach-ins, and then we felt like there wasn't any response to our demands, or even that we were doing anything from the administration that we felt like was really recognizing
Mhm.
what we felt was an urgent issue. And so I think we decided to step it up a notch, but it was after a lot of discussion that there was agreement that we would do a hunger strike, or that some people were willing to do that. I think, yeah, politically, we weren't sure if, I think there was a number of us that felt like politically, why are we the ones, as the students of color, putting our health and our safety on the line when this was totally jacked up, and that there needed to be a response, and be something active that tried to shift things. So why were we the ones that were putting ourselves at risk for that cause, not for the cause, but for the situation when the administration should be serving our needs as
Mhm.
students of the community. But we came to that agreement. And so, yeah, we started the hunger strike April
Yeah,
1st.
yeah, no, that was actually like such a comprehensive summary of what happened. Thank you. Yeah, and like I'm just curious on so many levels, because so you're involved with the Asian American sort of students who wanted. So what I understand is there were sort of like tracks for like Latina studies, like students who wanted their own sort of courseworks and like faculty. There was like Asian American, there was African American, and then you sort of created a united front at about like 1995, right? Like,
Yeah.
what had the because one of the things that Marcel told me during his interview was when like the first meeting between the students from each front occurred, he described it as like the Asian American like student, that group had like had it all. And they were like, he described as like they came in like, oh, we should have like a Latino studies program, but the Asian American students were like, we need to have this, and like, had a whole had a whole list of things, demands, so much like more organized and like thought of. And I'm just wondering what that side of the story sounded like.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. We had our shit together. um
They did.
we had so there were two students who were graduate students who had been in this fight for a long time, and I don't know if Marcel talked about them.
Mhm.
One was Jane Bay.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know if you've talked to her, but she goes by Sungi now. But and then Alexandra who goes by Sungi, I think. I think she's in California. Um, but they had been fighting for something with Asian American studies for a long time. And
Mhm.
I think on campus, there was really a lack of understanding that there was a difference between East Asian studies
Mm.
and Asian American studies.
I
Um,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, this was like, this is a couple decades ago. So, um, so, obviously, like, you're of a different generation with a different kind of mindset, but things were pretty still in early stages of development, I think, even though since the 60s, there have been fights around, trying to get ethnic studies and, Asian American, African American, Latino studies. But all that to say that they had been fighting for a while. This is my recollection of it. They had been fighting for a while. And so they had, been thinking about this for a long time, and they brought in some other, or I don't know if they brought in, but somehow there was a collection of students who were mostly undergraduate, but a couple of these graduate students that came together. And that's what I got pulled into initially. But then, and so, there had been a lot of thought and development of ideas, I think, prior to us, reaching out to the Latino and African American students, because we recognized there needed to be something more. And we needed to up the level of fight, but that we really needed to build some kind of a united front around this. The thing about the Black students, Manning Marable had already started the center that he ran.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I actually can't remember the name of it. Do you know the name?
The IRAS, the Institute for I think African American Studies. I'm also not sure of the name right now.
Yeah, probably research. IRAS. Yeah, Institute for Research and something. Yeah.
Right.
I'm not sure, but yeah. So he had his center already, and so it was, but the Latina contingent, there wasn't anything obviously focused on Latin American studies or Latino studies, and there wasn't an Asian American focus. And so we felt like we needed to sort of break through that, but that we couldn't do it unless there was a united front. And so we reached out to both groups of students. And I think, I don't know if Marcel talked about this because I don't remember this very clearly, but there were students already working on that to some extent. But I don't remember how far along things were with them. And then the Black Student Organization was active, but they weren't necessarily focused on curricular issues, like changing the curriculum. Yeah. Because they had that center that Manning Marable ran, but also I'm remembering that there was something going on at the time where there was some kind of tension brewing with the Black student organizations and like the sort of conservative, like Republican
like group of students.
Yeah, I don't know if it was like a club. I don't remember what it was exactly, but there was something brewing on campus. And I remember there was in the Spectator, there were articles that maybe you have.
Yes, I saw them, and I was like, these names keep coming out, and they are definitely going at each other. So I see that it's there was articles, like editorials printed from the young, like Republican sort of like party. And then there were articles from like the BSO, the Black Student Organization, and that was another sort of like line of contention. I definitely
that was sort of brewing, and I feel like that Sherrod Baker was the head of the BSO at the time, I think. And I think whatever was happening, I think maybe Sherrod was bringing Louis Farrakhan onto campus too or something from the Nation of Islam. I can't remember. Anyways, there's things that were happening that were adding to the sort of campus political dynamics that was getting tenser and tenser. And I think that actually facilitated both a broader student movement, but also the ability to sort of get people engaged more quickly. I think we had sort of come to a head around something. And so, yeah. So
Yeah,
I think all these things kind of lined up. Yeah, I remember vaguely our first meeting when everybody came together. And there was a lot of like, you know, what do you guys want? We
yeah,
called the meeting. I think we called the meeting,
uh-huh.
the Asian American students, and and we weren't like some huge group or anything. Like there were Asian American student groups on campus
Mhm.
that were sort of more focused on sort of social activities and other
Right,
kinds of
right. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, efforts, but ours was very specific around the need to shift the curricula and
Right.
shift the sort of hegemonic paradigm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all written there, and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, that's really good to know. Yeah, it's really because I think it's really meaningful that you all sort of decided and like all cooperated for a united front, because that I think was eventually what sort of tipped the stakes, because it engendered that huge sort of like coalition among the students themselves. And
Mhm.
that's what really, like, and you also mentioned the teach-ins, and that was created from this united front of students, right?
I think so, yeah. Trying to remember the first one in Butler. I'm pretty sure we were already, yeah, I'm certain already
Mm-hmm,
connected.
mm-hmm.
I think so. Yeah, actually, you're reminding me. I think when we were trying to decide around the hunger strikes, we also we felt like if we were going to do the hunger strike, then we needed to elevate the other kinds of civil disobediences. Or
Right.
actually, we hadn't done any civil disobediences really up until that point, but we
Mm-hmm.
needed to elevate the activity so that it wasn't just sort of a passive, not that a hunger strike is necessarily passive, it's a tactic, but that we had other tactics that could complement that, that would both draw attention and also relay a message.
Absolutely. Yeah. The teach-ins were to sort of like, get a broader, like a wider sense of like, oh, what we're doing, and like what you are like asking for to a lot of people. And sit-ins at the dean's office just a month before. And I think that made into a pattern. Yeah. So on the day of the hunger strike, I know like the four students put a tent on like the south lawn, and started their hunger strike. And it's my knowledge that you all sort of like divided up into roles. Some people take care of the media, some people work on like the negotiating the proposal, some people actually just like participate on the hunger strike. What was your role, and how was your experience with it?
Yeah. I don't remember. I think I had to talk to media. And I
Mhm,
think I was one of the, yeah, I mean, I think I probably, I definitely talked to media. I know that. And I don't remember if that was like my explicit role.
mhm.
But I was on the sort of like tactical decision-making group,
Right. Mhm.
to think about how things were, moving and changing, and what needed, what we thought would be um, good decisions to keep advancing the goal of getting an ethnic studies department
Mhm.
met. So yeah, and then a lot of other things in between. Oh, and also I think we did a lot of outreach to that I participated in a lot of outreach to basically like some other groups in the community, immediate community, and outside of sort of beyond that as well. We had um, some of us were already working with CAV, and brought in some friends from, those spaces, organizing spaces outside of the campus. And then I had been working with like a youth program in Harlem. And so sort of like, and this man named Father Castle ran this church where we held the youth program, and he was sympathetic to us and had been his own activist back in the day, actually had been an activist alongside the then president of Colombia. And so kind of felt, we kind of felt like maybe he had some pull or something. And so,
yeah.
would have him come and speak, so we would have like different members outside of the immediate Columbia campus community to try and, join us for different events, rallies, and be speakers. And I also remember now, I think there was a strike going on for some of the workers on campus, and I don't remember which workers, but I think we tried to join up some efforts with some of those worker strikes that were happening on campus too.
Yeah. And like I do have some record of like the flyers, like very limited, but flyers from like the 1996. And there are like, on campus like candlelight vigils where like undergraduates or graduates can mostly come, but there are like community-wide rally calls for like members in the Morningside community and otherwise to sort of like join in the protest because they are a part of all this. It's impossible to just be like it's only like our curriculum issue. It's about like an educational institution in Harlem in this like Morningside community interacting with all these factors outside.
Yeah, absolutely. And just the fact that like, what we were trying to fight for was having like, basically like a historical recognition of the contributions of people of color in this country. And we were situated in a community of color as a very privileged institution, and it was almost like we're denying the actual history of the place where we're located. And yeah, anyway, so that absolutely we were trying to reach out. Yes, there were candlelight vigils. That's right. There are so many pieces. We were just organizing every day. Also, the Native American students,
Right.
we were in close touch with them, but they didn't feel like they had formed enough of a
like an organization structure.
to feel like they could think through what it meant to fight for, not that they couldn't think through, but they weren't at a point yet in their own development as a group to put on the table a fight for Native and Indigenous, some kind of Native and Indigenous studies. So they were definitely sort of like connected to the fight and the struggle and allies there, but they didn't feel ready to fully participate in that way. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. They showed their support outside of just like a
Oh yeah.
organization. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. There was also some tensions because I think maybe Professor Marable felt like the call for ethnic studies would undermine what he had already established, which I know was hard, hard won. And I understand that. I mean, and so there is those kinds of complicated politics also. But we definitely, as students, tried to stay united, and I thought we did, which was pretty great.
Yeah. It's being united for a cause. And I'm also part of like Asian American sort of like more culture, like academic groups on campus. And, I know how hard it can be when it's just like four of us coming together and trying to decide on what color of banner to do for like this party. Like we have so many different ideas and arguments. It's really shocking and also like really commendable that like all these students sort of like decided on and made this whole movement possible. And there were, as you said, tensions with different players and different entities, but just stuck together. And then
Yeah. Actually, also, so after 96, since I'd taken a year off, I ended up being one of the student reps, the Asian American student representatives on the, I guess it was the selection committee for interviewing who would be
Right.
hired as the person who ran the center, the
Mhm.
first person. Yeah. So, yeah, that was the role, but later on, a little bit later on.
Yeah, yeah. And that was eventually, I would say, like one of the fruits of like the protests and like the student demands, because I remember reading in the Spectator that like the administration was having all this procedure not really accessible to the students, and just like, they were saying like, oh, we'll have student input, but didn't really specify what the students are going to have, like a committee or it's like anything. So yeah, yeah, it
Hmm.
definitely is like a result of the demands and protests. So yeah,
Hmm. Yeah.
I
Mhm.
would. So, you know, like the hunger strikes began, and was there a specific, like, most memorable moment you recall throughout the strike that you sort of recall, or like anything to share in the procession of what sort of like rolled out?
Yeah. I mean, the chronology is a little bit foggy at this point, but
Mhm,
some of the things I remember stopping traffic one day.
mhm,
And I think the hunger strikes had started, I think it was early on.
mhm,
And I remember we had decided we were going to do this, and it was sort of a spur of the moment thing. I think we had just done, I feel like maybe maybe the Native community led, um, like a short rain ceremony or something. I feel like we did something on campus briefly. Um, and then we decided we were going to go stop traffic to try to bring media attention to the situation.
mm, mhm,
And I remember some friends who were involved but weren't as sort of active and central. They were scared to do this, but basically the plan was like, we're going to go into the middle of the street and
mm,
link arms, and stop traffic. And
mhm.
so we did, and it was like completely successful. And we had so much media attention from that. There was just like helicopters flying overhead, and there was just like, um, it caught people's attention. And I remember that because I remember, um, most distinctly was I was trying to get a friend of mine to come and do it with us, and he was really scared and he didn't want to do it. But
Uh,
then once he saw the power of what we could actually do, like the power of the students, like we had enough of a critical mass that we could put our bodies on the line in that way, and make a pretty strong statement. And I remember his shift of like being like terrified to like empowered,
uh-huh.
and that really stayed with me. Sort of seeing his little transformation in like in like 5 minutes.
Yeah,
It was,
yeah.
it was
In that
cool.
short second of, yeah.
Yeah, of like, not wanting to take a stand, but then, seeing so many people willing to take a stand and then joining and then really feeling the power of what we could actually do,
Mhm,
if we, unified and, could actually take a decision to move forward and not sort of accept defeat or something.
mhm.
So that was, yeah, that has always stuck in my mind. Um, we did so many like building takeovers or like so many plans to do these different takeovers, and some were successful, some were not, but we took over the library, and that was significant. And I remember there was these decisions about, anyways, there's like lots of tactical decisions that needed to be made along the way.
Mhm.
um but yeah, yeah, I don't remember all of the details of it that clearly, but I remember sort of as it was happening, and then the sort of confrontation with the authorities, the administration, the police, and then how many people like actually stayed in the library. And
Mhm, mhm.
we slept in that, like that. rotunda, and
Right.
I don't know, just these different significant moments.
Mhm.
Um, and I remember, they were taking photographs of us to put us on to give us a probation note. And I think that's where, I got put on probation. And I think it was during that incident that they took my photo, and because they were standing in the front and trying to pick off people that I think they,
Right. For like identification.
yeah, so that they could have evidence to actually put you on probation and all that. So, but that was definitely a significant event as one of the big takeovers. And then the next morning, I just remember, I think we had the bullhorn, and
Uh-huh.
we were standing on several people had gotten arrested, and it was all planned out. We needed to, we were trying to be really sort of both disciplined and strategic,
Right.
tactical in our strategy. And so I think we had the bullhorn, and I don't remember what was being yelled out, but I feel like
Uh-huh.
one of our folks was standing at the top of the steps with the bullhorn and sort of yelling into the campus, kind of we're here, we want to be heard. And there was a lot of administration sort of standing around because they couldn't really, because we had occupied the building, so they couldn't get into their offices and stuff like that. And then and I remember it was a gray day, and there was just a ton of people gathered around, both staff, faculty, students, and we were just in layers around the sort of the
Mm.
steps. And I remember there's a photo that was in the New York Times. It was on the front page of the Times.
Mm.
Angelique, was that who it was? I can't remember, but
Mhm.
I think it's an image of her with the bullhorn at the top of the
Mm.
steps.
Mm.
That was definitely a memorable thing. And
Right.
yeah, there's these random things, and they're not so random, but there's different moments that are sort of stuck in my mind in
Yeah.
the sequence of things that happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think these are really important because, like, for example, like I know, like I've read about the low library, rotunda, sleep in and everything, but it's so hard to imagine that, especially now. And the traffic stop, I didn't because you also said it was sort of in the at the moment you sort of made that tactical decision, so there wasn't a media release for it, there wasn't anything about it, but it just happened on the day of. And it just sometimes it lacks documentation, and it didn't hit hit the papers in the right moment or something. So all of this is really just helps me reinforce the image of what it must have been like. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was on the news that night. I think that's why there were helicopters sort of broadcasting it. And
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
If there
That's what
were,
I remember, because I was like, oh my
I'm
God,
very
I can't
sure there
believe
was
this
some.
worked.
Absolutely, absolutely.
um, yeah, so yeah, those things. And then we took over Hamilton.
Mhm. Right.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
that
I actually don't remember how long we slept in Low, maybe just one night or something.
mhm, mhm.
And then I think then after Low, we kind of regrouped, and then we took over Hamilton. And I remember I think it was at the end of the week, because there was a weekend in there. Uh,
Right. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And so we stopped classes maybe for a day and a half or something like that. And maybe through the weekend, I can't remember. I mean, after the weekend, but
Mhm,
that's where sort of the negotiations really started.
mhm.
Because I remember we were in Hamilton waiting to hear back from
Yeah,
the,
the negotiating committee.
yeah. And also my parents and my grandmother came to visit while we were occupying Hamilton. I remember they came, and I was like, I'm sorry, I can't really spend any time with you. But they all came to one of the rallies at Hamilton
Oh, that is
in support. Yeah.
That is
So,
another level of parental support.
yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's a important memory right there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're like, what are you doing? Okay.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Because like one of the first people I interviewed was an undergraduate student, and she talks about how like she wasn't involved in this like until the day of the hunger strike, and when she sort of like saw what was sort of happening and what the students were fighting for, she sort of like eventually joined in and participated in like the Hamilton Hall like occupation and all of that. And she also I think got like probation, but she also talks about like, her parents were like really, scared that she might like, lose her standing in the university, but they were still like, like you got to see this through because, you can't let this stop it, but they were also really scared. So yeah, it's crazy how like because I do have like my own like South Korean parents who like freak out every time like the school sends them like an email, even though it's something about like financial aid or like class days, and they're like, is something wrong?
yeah.
Yeah, that hits me in another level.
Yep, totally.
Definitely, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe so like towards the end, I know like the administration eventually sort of negotiated a proposal to like hire, I think like hire two like tenure faculty in like Asian American studies, and then like um um I think one more like faculty in like Latino studies. Like how did the negotiations like come to you? Like how did the students take it?
Yeah. It's a good question. I mean, I don't remember all of, I think at that point, yeah, that's like a super big blur for me. I
Mhm.
remember they would negotiate, they would come out, we would give feedback.
Mhm. And they would sort of like go back in and do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I feel like there was some amount of back and forth.
Mhm.
Um, and then at some point, like it seemed like we were close, but everybody was exhausted, like it was like we didn't sleep for like months.
Yeah.
And then some of us were trying to like, we were also doing schoolwork, right? So, or enough to get by or whatever. And
Right.
so I just remember it was like pretty emotional towards the end. And,
Mm.
as the negotiating team was sort of coming to, uh, I don't know, compromise, I guess
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
best word, like, but a compromise that we were willing to live with, sort of.
Mhm.
Um, I think I just remember like we were all so tired, and it was just like, you know, and I think in part the students that were in Hamilton Hall and like listening to, you know, what was happening with the negotiations, like at each stage.
Mhm.
I think they were trying to follow also the lead of, um, the negotiators themselves,
Right.
like
Right.
those of us who had been organizing,
Mhm.
and, um, like I don't think there was ever any like big disagreement or anything like
Mhm.
that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think they were, yeah,
Yeah.
we were all just trying to like, I think we were trying to not get co-opted and compromised
Mm.
completely. But I think at some point realized there were some certain concessions maybe we had to make. We wanted a department at the time. That was like a big thing. But, um, you know, I think there was a period where afterwards where we kind of felt like we were a little co-opted because it wasn't going to be a department and students couldn't
Mhm.
actually get couldn't actually major in,
Mhm. Mhm.
so that's why like hearing what you were telling me earlier, like the
Yeah.
developments now is like very
Yeah.
heartening. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but all that to say that uh, I think, I think we handled it as like well and as smoothly as possible. And I think it was a difficult time after so many months of struggle and then a really intensive period of the hunger strike for 2 weeks. And then, but I don't think there was ever any kind of sort of difficulty on the students' end. I think people
Mhm.
were, from what I can remember, receptive, and there was some like back and forth a little bit, but I think,
Mhm.
we were all sort of, moving in the direction that the negotiators felt like they could do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
That's really heartening to hear because when like a lot of like strikes and student movements, like in the end where you need to like sit down and negotiate for something, there's got to be some like disagreements and dissenters, and sometimes that goes on for a while, and then like the cooperation among the students are sort of like sacrificed to like
Uh-huh.
at the very like last moment when they should be enjoying it in a way. So yeah, yeah, that's like really good to hear, and that's a special kind of like solidarity like mindset. I think that's like very rare in like a lot of like student movements overall. Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm, mhm.
that's very commendable. Maybe it's a silly question, but like how did that personally in terms of like your own work and stuff like that? Because like I know like even the hunger strikers had to sitting in a tent, but they were also like going to classes and then coming back to the tent. So
Hmm.
like how was that? How was like literally balancing work, social life, and on top of that a whole strike?
Yeah.
It's
Well, our social life was the movement, the whatever, the organizing each
yeah,
other,
yeah.
um, that was pretty much it. Um, actually, that's an interesting question because the friends that I was, hanging out with prior to that,
Mhm.
like it really shifted because a lot of them weren't actively involved. Like I think some of them may have participated. Yeah, definitely some of them participated in like sleeping in low. I mean, yeah,
Mhm.
in low, and but weren't like the main organizers of this
Mhm. Mhm.
of all of this. And so um my social life became the people I was organizing with and
Absolutely.
working with,
That's
and
that's
yeah,
huge, just like bonding experience right
yeah,
there.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was hard. I mean,
Mm.
like doing schoolwork was incredibly hard. I remember at the end, towards the end of, it must have been the end of 96.
Mhm.
I remember I had some final, like some bio or chemistry final or something. And this guy was like, hey, do you want to study together? I was like, sure. And this was after all of
Huh.
the protests were done for the year. Um, or maybe it was at the tail end, but I think the hunger strike was over. Anyways, I just remember like I went to his room and he was like, hey, we could go over these vocabularies. And I was like, I know nothing. I actually can't study with you, I'm realizing, because I don't know anything and you know something.
That makes a lot of sense right now. Yeah, yeah.
So I'm like, I think I just need to hole up in a room and try
Yeah.
to figure this shit out myself.
Yeah, just, yeah, let's have some individual time so I
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely, you know, it
It
was definitely a struggle to
I
finish
know. Oh,
school.
definitely, definitely, yeah. But, like, but like, logically so, because, if you're stopping traffic, like, overseeing media for the hunger strike, and on top of that, like occupying so many different halls, I mean, it's natural that you didn't know too much chemistry vocabulary by the end of the semester. Yeah. No, no, no. That
Yeah, I mean, also actually, as you're saying those different things, I think one of the things that often, gets left out in some of these narratives is that there's just like a lot of emotional labor that goes into this. Like there's a emotional labor in terms of like what we're fighting for and why we're invested in these particular fights, right? What does it advance and why? And why is it important to us? But also like, like with each stage, we're getting attacked for trying to push forward what we think is just and actually makes sense to include
mm,
in like a major institution of higher education, to actually include our histories in this country and the contributions that we've made to the country being, like what it is. It's on the backs of our, our land, our labor, et cetera. And um, so every night, like every time there was some action we took, or something happened, there was also emotional support we had to provide to each other around what happened, right? Like who's getting arrested, who needs like a shoulder to cry on after that, who needs to, like who needs to like debrief or talk through some intense stuff that they're, it's like there's like there, and every night we were like up against trying to make hard decisions, trying to figure out what to do next. All these things are part of what made it possible, and having each other's backs around it, and having like, sort of the there was sort of the like the main organizers, and then there was like the people that were helping with different efforts. Like a friend of mine, actually Marcel's wife,
mhm.
was she was trying to do some like education something, can't remember exactly what they were, but sort of meetings, like basically to like help people learn more about what we were
Mhm.
striking for and protesting on. And she would do that like in the evenings, and like, in different dorms, she would like, stake out and like, have a, like a sign up sheet and like talk to
Mhm.
people about whatever they wanted to learn about it, So there was lots
Personal.
of like tiers of activities that were happening that people took initiative on and, wanted to um, do for the effort. And yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it sounds like it was like such a dedicated group of like people, just like all fighting their own like personal battles, as well as this like whole like huge battle against like the administration. And it's sort of like crazy, because like when I still think about it, it was students fighting for they weren't fighting for random things. It was fighting for a curriculum that they just wanted future students to major in, or like have a conversation around. And it sometimes like doesn't like register that there's so much challenges to a group of students asking to be educated in a certain area. Like,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, totally.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting just thinking about like how much has changed sort of socially,
Mhm.
so that, now it's, yeah, it's actually, I'm remembering, I think Marcel might have texted me when Columbia decided to allow for
Mhm.
majors
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
happen under the center. And it's like, yeah, it's like decades later. Were you guys the first year that this happened, that you were allowed to major, or
No,
was
no,
it
no.
been a couple of years?
I think it's been it's definitely been like a um I honestly am not sure about like the present, like after like 1999. I'm not very clear on the Caesar history. That's one part I'm really lacking on. But I am sure that like at least like six 6 years ago, 6 to 8 years ago, there like it was allowed that people could either major or concentrate in it. Because
Mm,
I remember like seeing in the departmental sort of like descriptions on like the courseworks page or something that, these are the major requirements and these are like the concentrator requirements. Yeah, yeah. So
good.
it's
Yeah.
been a while. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's just thinking about how times have changed and how there's, a lot more awareness in terms of like uh, both, racial oppression, but that also sort of how it operates in society
Hmm.
um, and liberation, the need for education to kind of keep advancing justice and liberation. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah. I'm really glad that I'm like telling this to you, because I do know that like even for Marcel or even for like other people that I've like reached out to, there were some like juniors and sophomores, but a lot of like the undergraduates involved in it were like seniors, who I think like knew that they weren't going to be like the recipients of the demands they were making.
Yeah.
So while I was researching, I read in like one of the editorials in 1996 saying, how are we ever gonna like, it was one of the dissenters to ethics studies, and they were like, how are we gonna get like, 8 courses in ethnic studies, and right now we have like, at least 15. So I'm like, yeah, the game changed. And it's really, all because of like the pressure that was put on the administration, like at the right time, at it using like the right methods that really just like sped up the whole process. As far as I know, without that like foundational year from like 1994 to 1996, when there was a student strike, I don't think that an ethnic studies center, like a department, even imagining it, would have taken like 20 or 30 years more. Because that's
Hmm.
what happens with, the African American Studies department. That was also created because of a certain kind of pressure. And that's just how like the administration sort of like works, especially if it concerns studies towards and honoring minorities and immigrants. And I think that's what you sort of like all accomplished for us. And that's why, I'm able to be educated in the specific elements that I find so meaningful and disruptive, and like, yeah, yeah, it's great, all the gratitude and thank you to the fighters of 1996.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's really cool to hear from a student who's actually been able to benefit from being
Yeah.
part of the program.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely.
really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I do talk about it. Like I will like at the end of the project, when I do like finalize the website, I will like send all my interviewers like interviewees like what I created. But one of the things that I wrote there like was like, I'm also a immigrant. I'm also like an international student who came from South Korea for like college to Columbia. And I remember like, like being riddled by like imposter syndrome, and like, oh my god, New York City, like, and oh my god, I have to like use like a second language to like, buy Gatorade. But also Caesar, like, having the Center of Race and Ethnic Studies, where like myself and like my ethnicity could be studied, and like, every like, and the community of people around it is just so amazing. I just like felt at home right away. So
Mm,
yeah,
mm,
it wouldn't have been possible without like this being like a center, like a curriculum. Yeah.
mm. Cool. That's
Yeah.
really great to hear.
Yes, yes, it really is that.
Mm,
Oh, but I would say, yeah, thank you. And
yeah.
yeah, as soon as I like get this video clips, like I won't like edit it too much because it's all like archival sort of like quality. But as soon as I'm in the process, I will keep you in touch. And thank you so much for this.
Yeah. Thank you, Audrey. Thanks. It was great to talk to you today.
Great to talk to you. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.